My name's Alexis, and it's story time. You see, today's story is inspired by the one and the only Miss Taylor Swift. Now, this all boils down to an album that Miss Swift had released last year. This album is called Folklore, and within this album, there is a theme. There is a love story being told. So just a quick synopsis of the story before I go into details. It's not just boy meets girl and boy falls in love with girl, rather it's boy meets girl, they create this relationship, boy starts to look at another girl, starts to do other stuff with this other girl, girl number 2, let's say, then realizes that the weight of his actions had hurt said girl number 1. All the meanwhile, girl number 2 seems to be catching feelings for, well, this boy. Allow me to begin with my interpretation of Miss Swift's beautifully crafted love triangle. So who is girl number 1? Well, girl number 1's name is Betty. There's even a track on the album called Betty. She kind of made it easy for the fans this time. And the boy's name is James. His name isn't necessarily a track title. However, his name is mentioned in a song. And the mistress's name, well, we don't really know. Now let's begin with the story. So Betty and James seem to have met when they were in high school. And it was one of those relationships that would impact the rest of your life, whether you stayed together or not. Now here's where the tea starts to get a little hot. Allow me to introduce one more character. Her name's Inez. Now, Inez, she's a bit of a gossiper. She seems to have spilt the beans. Not literally, but yeah. Inez goes to Betty, tells Betty that James had been cheating on Betty throughout the entire month of August. And well, Betty kind of had a hunch this was happening. There's a track on this album titled Cardigan, and it's supposed to be the perspective of Betty. And within this track, Betty says something like, "You would play hide and seek and only give me your weekends." Meanwhile, girl number 2 is starting to be wrapped around James's tiny little boy finger. In fact, she would even cancel her plans just in case James would call, as she says in a song titled August. And you're probably thinking, Alexis, what is James feeling through all of this? Well, he goes on to say that the worst thing that James ever did was what he did to Betty, in a song titled Betty. So he plans out this big apology, and he hears about Betty throwing this big party, so he says, you know what? I'm gonna show up to her party. And so there's this whole track dedicated to James going up and apologizing to Betty. But we don't really know what happened in that encounter. All we know is years later, Betty seems to be reflecting in a song called Cardigan, and the mistress seems to be reflecting in a song called August. You're probably thinking, Alexis, what's the moral of the story? Well, it's really interesting to get the perspective of each person when an event occurs. And if you're interested in learning more about this story, I would highly suggest going and streaming Folklore and listening to the songs titled Cardigan, August, and Betty.